KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, whose vision is to deliver world-class care, making life better for the communities they are privileged to serve. Offering a comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and emergency care services so residents can live life better here. San Juan Regional Medical Center, community owned and operated, here for you. KSJE is proud to support the 43rd Annual Cancer Walkathon to benefit the Connolly Hospitality House. The walkathon will take place on Saturday, September 16th in a new location. The event will begin and end at Lock Street Eats in downtown Farmington. Form a team, become a volunteer, sponsor a walker, or make a donation. Find out more at sanjuanmedicalfoundation.com. The 43rd Annual Cancer Walkathon, Saturday, September 16th.
On 24th Street.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Cop Shop with FPD. I'm your host, Chief Steve Hebbe, and with me, as always, is Shanice Gonzales. How are you, Shanice?
I'm good. I'm ready for warmer or colder weather.
Yes, we're already into September.
Yep, fall is approaching.
The summer really went fast.
It flew.
It really did. But our temps are still pretty high
I know,
for early September.
unfortunately.
So it was a warm summer, and it remains the start of fall is pretty warm as well. But welcome to September. We're in our first one. Kids are back in school. And your kid's back in school?
She is.
Is she loving it?
She is loving it, yeah. There's not a lot of homework this year, so she can appreciate that.
I think I had a lot of homework. I don't think I did it. So there's different ways of not having a lot of homework.
Me too.
So anyway, with those paths behind us, today we're going to talk with you and give you an update sort of on the May 15th shooting and talk about a few other things. Scott has a major game coming up Monday night with those Buffalo Bills hitting the road again and entering the season. We'll talk about the Packers in depth. Shanice has done a lot of research for us and is going to explain the subtleties of the Tampa 2 as applied to the right-wing blitz of the Packers defense. So Shanice, we'll get to that later, but why don't we get started on the May 15th investigation?
So we're approaching the 4-month mark since the tragic shooting that occurred on May 15th. During that time, various media outlets have interviewed you, Chief, seeking updates and asking personal questions about what your experience was like during that time. So today I've put together a list of questions that reflect some of those inquiries, allowing us to discuss them here on the Cop Shop.
Okay.
So can you provide an update on Sergeant Rachel DeCenza?
I can. Actually, just on my way over here, I was talking with Rachel, and she is making good, solid progress. She continues to be back at work with us. She's on directed assignment, working upstairs with command on a variety of issues for us, but she is making good progress and it was in good spirits. So, I don't have a good timetable for when she would return to full duty, but we're very optimistic that she will be able to do that, and that was something that was definitely in doubt given her injuries on May 15th.
And it's awesome being able to see her around the department again.
Yeah, big smile on her face, happy to be at work. So she's doing a great job.
Yeah, she really is. Has the investigation into Bo Wilson been completed, and are Wilson's parents going to be charged?
So that is kind of the last sort of ball to drop on this investigation was, were there going to be any other people ancillary to Bo that were going to wind up being charged as a result of their actions in the case? And the first part of the question is the investigation over? And yes, it largely is. There's a few things maybe that we'll get back from the lab in the future, but those things really are more details to just close loops than germane to the essentials of the investigation. Essentially, the investigation is completed. We did meet with some of the family members and explained to them that although we looked, and we did look significantly at the actions of some of the people close to Bo, including the parents, we do not believe that there will be charges brought against anyone else in this case. So New Mexico law has a high level for us to wind up charging somebody when they didn't know what the person was going to do. So in the case of this with his parents, his access to guns or his ability to get weapons, when the parents have no idea what's going to happen, and when the parents have no idea what he's going to do with those, New Mexico law just doesn't allow for charging, and there's nothing under federal law either. So after consultations with the district attorney's office, we've concluded that there's no charges forthcoming.
Was Bo Wilson ever on FPD or any other radar?
You know, he really was not. And this question I've been asked a few times. Like Shanice said, we've done a number of interviews on this investigation, and that's one of the more key areas. And it ties in with some of the legislation that we talk about. One that was very big a few years back was red flag laws. In that case, the police could get notified of somebody in crisis and have an opportunity to intervene and, based on the investigation, make a decision as to whether or not to apply for an order by a judge, which they're calling red flag orders, extreme protection orders, another word for them. The judge could then order the person to surrender weapons. They would do that voluntarily to the police or sheriff's office. But it starts with somebody has to see something wrong and be alerted to a problem. Some of that goes back to my last answer on the ability of the parents to foresee what had happened. Really, nobody was able to see what was coming. We did not get alerted by anyone that Bo seemed to be in any particular crisis within the weeks leading up to it. Obviously he was, but he did a very good job, it appears, of keeping it from friends and family who never really understood how severe he was in crisis. So the answer to that is he never really rose on FPD's radar. Additionally, he got a weapon. He purchased an AR-15 several months prior to the incident, about a month after he turned 18. We do a background check as part of that, but again, the background check's based on your adult behavior. He'd been an adult for about a month. So FPD didn't have any history of him. He really just was not on anyone's radar.
And then just for some background knowledge, for somebody who is concerned for a family member, how do they go about the red flag law?
So there is, there's the ability for people, and people do it anyway, without understanding that there's a red flag component to it. When people are worried that a loved one is in crisis, they contact the police. We get contacted fairly frequently for possible suicide threats or just somebody in crisis that may be acting out in some way. And so you would call the police department, we would come over, and in the course of your conversation with the officers, you'd tell them, here's the behaviors that I'm seeing that's so concerning. And the extra element to this is the subject has access to 5 guns that are inside the residence. And so we would work with that person to talk with the judge. The judge would order the subject to bring in his weapons. He'd surrender them voluntarily to the police until such time that the judge orders us to release the weapons. And then we would release the weapons based on the subject is now over whatever crisis he was in. So it's a system with a lot of checks and balances. It really isn't the police doing much of it. We facilitate helping family members or friends deal with somebody who's in crisis and make sure that they're going to get through that crisis safely. And of course, in some of these cases, people are worried that somebody's suicidal and has access to guns. We can take those guns in with the judge's direction, and when they get through the crisis, they are either getting treatment or they're taking their medication again, and they get themselves stabilized. The weapons are returned to them. So it's not a permanent solution, but it definitely is one that helps people get through the crisis period that somebody's in. And so it starts with making that phone call to the police.
Very good. How did you balance the need for transparency with the public and the media while also respecting the ongoing investigation and the privacy of the victims' families?
That was a very difficult one. And the more high profile the case, right, the more pressure there is on the police to answer for this question. Balancing transparency and the public's right to know with not ruining the integrity of the investigation and some victim privacy as well. In this case, it was mostly done in the middle of broad daylight out in the street, and so a lot of the case was out there for the public anyway. So privacy became less of an issue. Some things like the autopsy report and things like that, of course, we were not broadcasting that and showing photos for the victim's family. We did minimal of that, and the new state law also helps in that we don't have to release footage that shows deceased bodies. That previous to this year, that was the way things were. We would have to release all body cam footage. They changed the IPRA law, the Inspection of Public Rights Act. Did a very good job down in the legislature this spring, listening to the concerns of chiefs like me, who don't view the police and our body cameras as intrusions by the government into citizens who then can be exploited and stuff thrown up on YouTube. So the legislature acted very, very positively, and we did not have to release a lot of the footage of the more graphic elements of that event. And so that is really about the best we could do for the victims' families on this, because it was such a public event and people were demanding information quickly. So as far as the investigation goes, how we really handled it was we had daily staff meetings, actually twice in the morning. We'd start off the day with a staff meeting, and then we'd have another one right towards the end of the morning as we're getting ready to go into the press conferences that we were doing. We established a regimen of a daily press conference for the first 4 days of the event, to give out as much as we could absolutely verify. So with the investigation, we aren't wanting to be out over our skis and be releasing info that we're it's conjecture or it's rumor. We wanted to know positively what we're releasing is everything we know at the latest right now. And then we can therefore project, okay, what's going to be the impact on the investigation if we're releasing this? So we really did twice a day meetings, prep for what we were going to talk about, and then we would move forward. And if you watch the press conferences, really we would tend to focus on one or two things that we had really spent our time running down. We knew this one cold, and we could put this out and give the public some information. And then tomorrow we would be focused on, okay, here's what we were going to focus on tomorrow. We want to run down these things, and we want to be able to verify what part of this is something we're confident in. So it was a lot of work behind the scenes. It was a lot of conversations. It was high stress, honestly. And chiefs don't tend to have that much stress like that. If my stress is more just the ongoing, how are we doing and where are we going, and am I positioning the department appropriately for the long term? This was more in your face right now. We need answers. You've got to keep up the morale of your troops during another shooting of an officer twice within 18 months. You've got to deal with the community who's reeling from unbelievably one of our worst days as a city ever. You've got families that have three people killed. You have other people that were shot in the course of the day, including 2 police officers. And then you're trying to give out this confirmed narrative of what happened. So that people have some sense of normalcy. Okay, the police know what's going on. They're running this down. Here's where it's focused. So all of that was high stress for myself and my command staff, like you just don't see on a usual basis.
And it's really hard to explain on how fast-paced everything has to be. So I was 6 months in on the job, and you just never stop. Like, there's never a break during any of that time. It's from one meeting to another meeting, and then you're checking other things, and then you're constantly going for days. That's just not something that you can really explain to people who haven't been through that. Even, when you talk to the other chiefs, you can't really get them to grasp that unless they've been through that, because it's just nonstop and it's overwhelming.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have grasped it, and I'm sure the public that's listening to this would struggle as well unless you've been there. Honestly, I'd listen to other chiefs that had been in bad spots too, and you try and imagine it, but until you're really there in the saddle and it's really coming at you. And the biggest thing is just all of those competing concerns and constituencies that you can't minimize any of them. Your officers are still hitting the street despite just a stunning event. One of your cops is shot, another officer from another agency shot, 4 officers charged down in addition to the sergeant to attack someone who was shooting up the community. Some of them didn't have vests on, and they were still responding and heading down there. So you've got your department to worry about. The community's reeling. What just happened? How did this happen? It quickly becomes the issue. How did this happen with an air of how could we have prevented it? Which of course we were focused on as well. So then throw it in that you're getting national media exposure. And so national affiliates are wanting a piece of Farmington and to characterize the story by however they see it as in this one it was some pro-gun, some anti-gun conversations thrown in. So the politics of it didn't help anything. And then just as a person, to be police chief during that, or even any of my senior command staff, or even Shanice responsible for trying to get the word out. I mean, there was just also a great sense of responsibility for what had happened in our community and shouldn't have happened, and then what are we doing about it, and how are we reacting to the public. So it was definitely a stressful time period for us.
And it's hard because you can only control so much when it goes national. So one of the problems was once it hit national, these national media outlets are contacting these families and they're trying to get pictures of the victims, and they're overwhelmed and they're handling everything that they're handling already, and their families are all in town and they're in the home with them and they're trying to grieve, and then their phones are blowing up and people are emailing them and people are getting like Facebook stalking them any way that they can reach them. So finally I put out a press release that the family had requested no contact, and then I got bombarded with the information, and they're like, well, can we get a picture of each of the victims? So then we had to facilitate that with the families, and then we eventually got permission. But it's one of those things that you see happening in other places, and they have pictures of the victims, but there's a process to it, and that process isn't always smooth, and sometimes it's just disruptive.
Yeah, and doesn't start off, and so that's from police administration versus my officers. It isn't a priority, my officers, right? They want to figure out what happened. They're worried about the case. They're worried about the investigation. They're worried about any other victims. They're worried about other witnesses. There's so many things at the tactical level of an event like that then for the administration to be worried about, we need pictures, so we need you to contact the family and get pictures. We're doing a press conference. The media wants to know this. The media wants to know that. It's easy to start separating where administration is politically versus where your troops are operationally. And the same is true with the victims' families. That wasn't how they expected they were going to spend that week, responding to viral media and seeing all of this play out nationally, and then get requests more from them when frankly they didn't have a lot more to give. They were just trying to hunker down and get through their days too. So it was a spectacular event, and if we're lucky, and God willing, we won't have another one similar to it.
Looking back, are there any lessons or insight you gained from this experience that you would like to share?
I think that we do a pretty good job at the things that we deal with on a regular basis. Like I just said, one of them isn't that we had photos, and that was one of the first things that we were worried about to give to the national media. And I get why they want it. I get why people are interested in a photo to put a face with the event, but it wasn't our natural strength. More was showing up, and you saw the officers respond, honestly. So start there with the training and the weaponry and the equipping that we'd done with the officers, so that they were A, confident, and B, well equipped enough to deal with a threat like that. So we'd done a good job in getting ourselves there. We did a good job in the immediate aftermath of trying to figure out, okay, we're getting a report of a second shooter, and we ran that down. And that was not an easy scenario, because you had so much conflicting information. There were so many shots, and over a distance that it led people to believe that there was a second shooter, and you don't want to call that search off until you're really confident. But we did a good job on that. We do a good job behind the scenes with our employees. We've really improved in that area. Law enforcement has in general, but the PD has as well. We have a counseling service now that's through a grant we've had for 3 years, and those counselors were immediately available for the officers and their families. We did some critical incident stress debriefings for our staff to help us get through Where I learned more was really we didn't do a great job. We just hadn't had the experience of it, and then we didn't think of it fast enough. And of course that's me, of the community. So I walked with the city council and the mayor up and down that street like the next week. And just knocked on doors and talked to people, and then we kind of learned, oh, geez, we've got people that they're stressed over the fact that we've got painted circles on the sidewalk where the casings were, and those circles eventually will wash away with rain and things like that. But it wasn't happening very fast, and people were still seeing it, and it was upsetting to them. So we came back and cleaned that up. We also learned that people had bullet holes and damage to their property, so we started making arrangements to try and have people helped with that. In the course of that, we met up with Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez, and we had a second then kind of community-wide meeting, and we brought in some of these resources, contractors who could come in and help to fix things in people's place. And all those contractors were free. They were donating their services to the community. So we were slower on that. And then ultimately, really what we learned in the second one with Congresswoman is we should have done a critical incident stress debriefing for the community, because that second one almost kind of came into that. People were still traumatized over it. People were talking about not going outside during the day because it happened during the day. People were talking about driving down the street and still seeing the scene in their head. And all of that is what our officers deal with, right? That's critical incident stress debriefings. As a chief, I was worried about the community as a whole and how we were reacting to it. I was worried about giving information. I was worried about my staff over my shoulder, how they were doing and helping them through it. We should have been faster, and we will be faster in the future about, let's call together a community group and let's just have a meeting and help them work through it the best that we can. So we did learn some things, and there was probably the biggest one.
5 weeks prior to this shooting, our department was under scrutiny due to a national controversial shooting. As the chief of police, what was it like experiencing both national criticism and national praise within such a short time frame?
It was, both events were just terrible for us, and easily in my 6 to 7 week time period there, it was the worst 6 to 7 weeks of my now 9.5 years as chief here. But what you aim for, regardless of the events, is you're going to be the same department. I'm going to be the same guy, and you aim for that consistency. So as a leader, right, my staff and the community, they want to see the same guy that they see every day, not just wild gyrations depending on whatever's going on. Certainly in-house, my staff needs to know that we're going to get through this, we're going to talk our way through. They've still got to go out every day. Which was what I was telling them in the wake of the April 5th shooting. And it was controversial in some quarters, and we were taking a fair amount of criticism that we had never taken before on such a broad base level. But what I was telling the troops was we still need to respond to calls, and we need to have our head in the game, because we don't know what's going to happen, and we can't have stacked mistakes. We can't make mistake after mistake when we're already under scrutiny. And secondarily is, if we're distracted by what's going on social media and we're not focused on our job, and then something like May 15th happens, maybe we get 3 officers shot and killed because we don't have our head in the game, we're not ready to go. So it was really a process of let's keep the staff focused on what we always do and what we know our job is, which they did an excellent job of. And then to the community, it was, look, we are the same department we've always been. We're still going to respond to calls. We're still going to do the best job we can. I'm still going to talk and explain the best I can what happened in situations. And we tried to do that in the wake of the April 5th. Many people accepted it. Some people did not. Same thing happened then with May 15th. We tried to be as transparent as quickly as we could. So the lesson is the same as Scott's football, which is a bit of a dangerous metaphor when you're talking about something as serious as the shootings that we had. But you are going to make mistakes, and at times you're going to have bad days, and you're going to have losses, and you've got to do the same thing, even when you're having those, as when times are great. So the crowd hates you when you lose a game, and then the next week you win and the crowd loves you. And if you're reading the press, right, you're thinking too good of yourself and you're thinking too bad of yourself at different times. The reality is we're the same department and I'm the same chief, really regardless of what happens on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and your leadership through all of that really was, there really weren't words for it. It was amazing to see how you handled everything that you've handled in the 9.5 years. So being with the department, and when I wasn't with the department, I was still watching everything that you had to say, and you're up front with all of your messaging, and all of the information comes from you directly. Doesn't matter whether it was good or bad. And I think that's really something that to admire about a police chief within our department.
Well, there's stuff to admire and there's stuff to not admire. I was very unhappy with how things had been handled in both incidents in some cases. I did not like the fact that we didn't get on the community and weren't trying to help the community faster. It just didn't occur to me. So I hate those kind of things. But as a chief, my troops did a great job. They did the best they could, every day in between those as well. And that's really all you can ask of people. And we're not perfect, but I will tell you, we strive very hard to be, and I take it dead serious. We are going to do the level best we can every day to provide a community with the best service that they deserve. So this ends another week. This was a more serious topic. Next week we'll go in depth and we'll let Shanice talk about her football knowledge, which is extensive, and Scott will talk a little bit about his Bills and how they did.